Well, to discuss the reaction here in Australia to these historic events, the Foreign Minister, Kevin Rudd, joins me now in the studio. Thanks very much for coming in, Mr. Rudd. First of all, your reaction to the news of the jubilation in Egypt that we've seen.
Well, I just spoke to our ambassador in Cairo an hour or two ago, and she describes the events as something like a carnival of democracy at the moment. The streets are riotous, as your viewers will see on the screen. There is absolute sense of ecstatic celebration of what's happened. What's my view? My view is that the people of this most ancient civilization truly deserve a most modern of democracies. And what we've seen is a celebration of peaceful protest, courageous protest, under considerable duress, ultimately caused the regime to conclude that the only path ahead was fundamental change.
What about those steps towards democracy? The army says it will relinquish emergency rule after the celebrations are over, but Egypt is in effect ruled by the military at this moment.
What we have right now is an uncertain set of circumstances, and again I've been speaking with our ambassador about the precise processes which unfold from here. And there is great lack of clarity. Let's just be honest about that. One, when the military council has assumed the powers of the presidency, what precisely does that mean? Two, does it mean that the current cabinet appointed by President Mubarak, former President Mubarak, is still in force and still in power or not? And thirdly, will an interim government be established? And I suppose the last question is, what formal mechanism is established to bring about the transformation to democratic elections?
They have scheduled elections for September. This is a massive protest for a country that is not familiar with democracy. Should those elections be postponed?
I think this is all a matter for the Egyptian people, but I think the mood that we detect from the people is they want to get on with the business. You said before it's not within their tradition. Well, let's just look a little to our north here in Australia, a country where it was often said it was not within their tradition either, Indonesia. Here is a country which in the end of the New Order period under President Suharto engineered a fundamental democratic transformation. Sure, it was bumpy, sure it was uneven, but look at Indonesia today. Therefore, there is a trajectory to the future here for our friends in the Muslim world. And Indonesia stands out as a good example. Turkey stands out as a good example. These things can be done.
Do other autocratic leaders need to be worried after seeing these pictures?
No, Jane, our view is democracy is a universal value. And I've never bought the idea that it is culture-specific and that it is limited to a group of people with a particular culture at a particular time in history. It's a universal aspiration. You've seen people from a vastly different civilizational tradition to the one which you and I know, celebrating in the streets of Cairo about something intrinsic, which is the cry for freedom. And the cry for freedom of political expression. Therefore, to go to the core of your question around the Middle East, I think it's incumbent on all governments to take note of the people on the streets of Cairo, because this is a legitimate aspiration of all. Each country's circumstances are different. Each country's circumstances are shaped and tailored by history. But there is a universal call here, and it's up to each country to shape, and each people to shape their future path here.
Not just the Middle East, perhaps China?
We have had a universal view on democracy and human rights, and we've also said this is to be shaped ultimately by the peoples of those countries. But we don't back away from the universal standard, and that's why it doesn't matter which debate we enter into around the world, the underlying principle for us in defence of democracy and wider human rights considerations remains constant. But it's up for each people to decide their path ahead, and we've seen the people of Egypt speak loudly, clearly, courageously, peacefully and effectively.